Pack a sefer. People pack food. People pack a sefer. People should learn. Okay, very good. We are on Yudam and Aleph. We are on 10a. We are figuring out. We are going through the Uri Miklat, the cities of refuge, and the Gemara is going to discuss different laws regarding these cities. So the last thing we were up to yesterday in Yudam and Aleph, 10a, was we discussed Hebron, because we said that Hebron was one of the cities of Miklat. And it's interesting to note, we know Hebron is the place where the Marat HaMachpelah is. We know Shechem is the place where Yosef is buried. So these are places of great holiness, Hebron and Shechem. So two out of the three major cities of Miklat in Eretz Yisrael are very well known to the Jewish community. Shechem and Hebron. And I presume it's not, and I would say that it's not a coincidence, of course, because we want the person who goes to Uri Miklat, it's part of a process. He killed someone unintentionally, and he's in a difficult situation. He has to be exiled away from his house, away from his original house, original workplace. Now he moves into another place, another neighborhood. And the fact that this town, this area where he's moving into, is where the Marat HaMachpelah is. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are buried. Amos, the mothers of Sarah, Rivka, Leah are buried. Or the Mechava are buried. That will be a source of great chizuk for the person who killed unintentionally, who's now that Uri Miklat. Similarly, in Shechem, where Yosef is buried in Shechem, so it also would be a source of great chizuk to be in a place where he's such a holy place of Shechem, where Yosef, a tzaddik, is buried, and also it should serve as an inspiration for the person to emulate the ways of the Avot, ways of Yosef. Because if a person went ahead and he killed unintentionally, as we said, there's a little level of negligence. It wasn't a total accident, because if it would have been a total accident, he would not have gotten the punishment of exile. The fact that he has to go to exile is a sign that he did something, there was something that he could have done better, and he didn't. And now, by being in the town where the Avot are buried, Yosef is buried, he will be inspired to emulate the great tzaddikim that live there, and he will never do such a thing again. We'll never have a situation that will ever lead to another unintentional murder. And it's interesting to note, even the third major city in Israel that was separated as Uri Miklat, what was it called? It was called Kadesh. So I wonder also if the Kadesh, a lot of times the name is connected to, if the name says Kadesh, which seems to be from the word Kadosh. So I wonder what its history of that place was. I wonder if it had certain unique holiness, and therefore maybe that's also why that was the city that was going to be designated for a city of refuge. But we need that person killed a Jew to grow in his holiness, and therefore we need to put him into such a special place, and that's Kedesh. That's how some explain that, we said there was 42 cities of the Leviim also served as cities of refuge for a person who killed unintentionally. By living, the question is why specifically those cities of the Leviim? Because the cities of the Leviim, the 42 cities of the Leviim are the rabbis Leviim are the people. Yor Mishpatecha Yaakov v'Sarosa Yisrael. They're the ones that are not working in the fields. They're teaching. They are in the Torah fields, working, teaching Torah. They're being supported by the community, the Leviim. The community is giving them the Maaseh Rishon. That's what's supporting the Leviim, and therefore the Leviim have food, and now they're able to learn, teach Torah. And the Rotzeach, the man who killed unintentionally by living among the rabbis, living among these teachers of Torah, the Leviim. To remember, Leviim, besides teaching Torah, they served in the Beit HaMikdash. They served as gatekeepers. They served as the singers. So they were very involved in communal service. They were involved in the Beit HaMikdash. They spent time in the Beit HaMikdash on a regular basis. So you can imagine the level of spirituality that the Leviim were on. And we want the Rotzeach, the man who killed unintentionally, to find himself in such an environment of the Leviim, that hopefully that will inspire him to be a different type of person, to be more careful in the future. So that's perhaps why specifically the 42 cities of Leviim were there for as Ari Miklat, because they're going to be the great influences. We all know the environment that a person finds himself in. If you're in a certain type of environment, that transforms a person. You know, like the Rambam says, a person is very influenced by their friends, who the friends are, they hang out with. That's why it's so important. Someone's children, who is someone's children hanging out with? And that's not only important to children, adults, who they hang with, who they spend their time with. They're going to be greatly influenced. We know we also found the Chazal not so long ago. We had Parshas Korach, and the story of Parshas Korach. We had the story of Korach creating a fight, a machloket against Moshe and Aaron. Really, as Moshe says, you're fighting against Hashem. And who did Korach enlist in his fight against Hashem, fight against Moshe? He enlisted the people from Bnei Ruvain. He got 250 people from the Sanhedrin, from the Bnei Ruvain, to be with him in the fight. And also he got On ben Peled, Datan Vaviram in the fight. How did he get these people in the fight? So Rashi says, because these were neighbors. Good morning, Morris. These were neighbors. And because they were neighbors, O the Rasha, O the Shechino. Woe to the wicked and woe to his neighbor. Because Korach was wicked, he turned wicked, he influenced his neighbors, the tribe of Reuven, to go ahead and to sin with him, to join the fight. But there's also a concept called Tov l'Tzadik, Tov l'Shechino. Good for the tzaddik and good for the neighbor. When someone is neighbors with a tzaddik, with the righteous person, that's why Morris makes sure before Morris moves into any building, make sure that there's a lot of tzaddikim in the building, or else Morris does not move into a building unless there's a lot of tzaddikim, right, Morris? He checks out the neighbors before he moves in, and that's the story, perhaps, why the Rotzeach, the one who kills unintentionally, finds himself among neighbors of Leviim, holy people. You know, it's interesting because the Torah refers to the guy who killed unintentionally as a Rotzeach, as a murderer. Happens to be he was a murder unintentional, but he's a Rotzeach, and it's serious business. Okay, so the Gemara we're up to. Good morning, Ariel. We are on Yud Amen Aleph. We're on 10a. In the art scroll, it should be around 10a1. Let's see, art scroll 10a1. let's see. 10a2, the beginning of 10a2. We Kedesh in Miklat Have. We mentioned one of the three major Ari Miklat in the land of Israel. One of them was called Kedesh. Kedesh. So the Gemara's question is, I don't understand, the Gemara says. We have cities of refuge. That the guy who killed unintentionally, he runs there and he stays there until the Kohen Gadol dies. So they were spread out. They were in Israel itself. The land of Israel was divided into three parts, and equidistant there was another city every certain amount, divided into three of Israel. But besides those three, there was another 42 cities. That the cities of the Leviim, where the Leviim lived, they also served as an Ari Miklat. But there was a couple of differences between the cities of the Leviim that served as Ari Miklat and these three that were over here, and the three on the other side of the Jordan. Before the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River, that's called the Ever HaYarden. That's where we're up to now in the Chumash. We're learning about that. They just conquered those places. There's the land of Sichon, the land of Og, and the Jewish community. They needed to they separated. Moshe Rabbeinu separated three cities over there. We said what's some of the differences between these 6 cities and the other 42. These 6 cities seem to be rent-free. Rent-free. That's what the guy who killed unintentionally does not have to pay rent. If he wants to go to the Leviim, if he wants to go to the other 42 cities of the Leviim, those 42 cities, he has to pay rent. That's one of the differences. Another difference is whichever Leviim have that spot. I presume the Leviim, let's say a city of Leviim. So in this, there's this, they had, yes. 42 cities that were given to Leviim. I have to know more about the details, but it would seem that within that those 42 cities, different Leviim had different ownership of different. Right. The Torah talks about not selling property. The Torah talks about what certain laws about the Ari Leviim, but here we're talking about rental space. They have to pay for rental space in this place. The other thing we said in the Gemara that. The cities of the Leviim will only serve as Ari Miklat if you entered with the mindset that it should serve as the Ari Miklat. But if you came in without knowing that this is a city of refuge, it does not work. That's you have to have knowledge that this is a city of refuge. The other 6 cities usually enter without knowing that it's a city of refuge. You came to Hebron. And Hebron, you went to visit the Marat Machpelah. And you went to visit Marat Machpelah, and then but you had the person had killed unintentionally. But he didn't know that Hebron was a city of refuge. Or he came to Shechem. He didn't know Shechem was a city of refuge, and they are a city of refuge. He will be safe. He's safe from the Gol Adam. Even though he didn't know, he came in without the mindset that it should serve as a city of refuge. But the other 42 cities of the Leviim, you have to have in mind that there should be a city of refuge. So the Gemara says, the Gemara is now discussing. Say it again. But we're going to see you might sound like a camp, but it's going to be a city because he's going to live there. It's going to be a place of real living as much as possible for him. So a city generally a city has to have a certain amount of people to be a city, but here we're going to see that the city that he lived in is going to be something that needs to be a mid-sized city. It can't be too many people, and it can't be too small. So we said the physical boundary. It's called the 42. Whatever the city of the Levium was, and the Gemara is also going to say the tchum of the city also would be kolei. Within 2,000 amot outside the city will also be part of the city itself. We'll look at it. What'd you say? No, it's a Levi city. Doesn't have Hebron. Does Hebron have a wall? Hebron doesn't have a wall. Shechem doesn't have a wall. Those are two of the three big cities of, to my knowledge, two of the three big cities that of refuge, Shechem and Hebron. Names of cities that we're very familiar with. We don't see any walls over there. So the Gemara says, Kedesh in Mikot, but we have a pasuk, and the pasuk says in Yeshua, when discusses some of the places that they're going to conquer, it says V'ori Mivsa, the cities that were fortified cities, Ser, Sidim, Ser, Hamat, Reket, V'Kineret. These were some of the cities in Eretz Yisrael that they're going to go ahead and conquer. And one of them, and they're called Ori Mivsar. Ori Mivsar is considered, Rashi says that Mivsar is a very big big city. And these are big cities in the portion of Naphtali. And Kadesh was listed as one of these great cities. And Vitanya, we learned in a Braita, Orim Halalu, Kadesh is one of the big cities in the portion of Naphtali. So, and what's the issue? The issue is, if Kadesh is a big city, we have a law that states you can't have a large city as a place of refuge. You can't have a large city because what are we afraid of? We're afraid if it's such a large city, everybody travels to the large city. So the Gol Hadam might be, well, went to a large city, everyone's coming to New York, right? And then what will happen is he's around town, he's going to lay in air, he's going to try to create a plan, a scheme to kill the person who killed unintentionally. Even though he's not allowed to do that, the Gol Adam is not allowed to do that. But when people are hot, when people are angry, when people are very emotional, they do things that are wrong, that are not logical. Just like we had the story of Cain killed Hevel. He was the first man described in the Torah as, what do you call it? Angry and depressed. I don't know what called it. There's a label, anger, depression. I don't know whatever the expression is. He was angry and depressed. And what happened? He killed his brother. So here is the same concern we have, that the guy, if the Gol Hadam, if the relative is going to frequent the city, he's gonna figure out a plan to get rid of maybe he will do it with nobody seeing. People think they'll get away with murder, right? You ask the question, what do you mean? The Gol Hadam, he has no right to go ahead and go into the city and kill this guy. He's liable to death if he doesn't, right? Because there's no allowance to kill the guy once the guy is in the city of refuge. So what will he do? He might cover it up. We'll do a gang-style murder, and he'll think that no one will see. A lot of people are sitting in jail. They also thought no one will see. Right? You know what I'm saying? That's what happens. So the Gemara says, "V'tanya," we learned in the Braita. Here are some of the specifics about the Orim Miklat. Orim Halalu, the cities of refuge. Ein osin otam lo irim, lo tirim ketanim. You can't make them small villages. If they're small villages, they can't be designated as Orim Miklat. V'lo krachim gedolim. You can't go ahead and make them into large cities. They can't be large cities. You can't be small villages. Ela ayorot beinanot. They need to be mid-sized cities. What's the problem with if they're small? So Rashi says, if they're small, then there's not such a good supply of food. The little towns have a little difficulty getting. People don't supply so much. Difficult to supply the little towns. There's not such a big customer base in the little towns. So therefore, we want to make sure that the person has proper food. And also you could say, when you're in a little village and you don't have enough food, you go out and you can go get food. But these guys are stuck. They can't leave the city of refuge. So therefore, you can't, this a place that's going to be a small place, that can't be the place that you designate as a city of refuge. So the Gemara says, and therefore it would be the responsibility of the courts, of the Sanhedrin, whoever the responsibility of the Jewish community to make sure that those cities of refuge remain a certain type of city. That would be their responsibility. So, right. So some want to learn from Rashi here, we're referring to the 6 that were designated, let's say the ones that, the big 6. So those big 6, if you look at, had these qualities. And Moshe designated these 3 over here, and Yeshua designated the other 3. So when they were designating these 6, this is how they needed to designate these 6. And that's how some understand the Gemara. The other thing I would say, but there's a Rashi somewhere else that seems to indicate that it's also going on the 42 cities of the Leviim. So it would seem to be that way, and also you would have, maybe you have to maintain it in a certain way, or create it in a certain way, or maintain it in this type of way. So the Gemara says, so how could Kedesh, to back to the Gemara's question, how could Kedesh be a city of Miklat if it's such a large, if we find that it's such a large city? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Tarate Kedesh have. There were 2 Kedesh. There were 2 cities. You know, sometimes a city has the same name. You can have a city in one place of Eretz Yisrael that's called Kedesh. Then you have another place, and even in the same area, even in the same, let's say, big territory. We're in the territory of Naphtali. You could have 2 cities they're called the same name. You know, let's say it's called East Side, West Side. You know, or I don't know if that's a good example, but certain things that one's at the east side, one's west side, upper east, upper west. So here you could have 2 places, but they're all Manhattan. This is Manhattan, that's Manhattan. So you could refer to both as Manhattan, but it's 2 different neighborhoods in Manhattan. So you could call this Kedesh and this Kedesh, but they're 2 different places. So there was a Kedesh that was a big city. And the way the Gemara wants to say, the Gemara says that it could, like we said, east side, west side, they could be next to each other, and you could call them by the same name. But you really, one's like the suburb, and one is the city itself. Yeah. Let's like you call something this Long Island City, and this Long Island, right? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef, Tarti Kedesh have. There were 2 cities that were called Kedesh. Amar Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi says, Kigon Selikum va'Akra de Selikum. There's a city that's a very big, strong city. A big city is called Silikum. And there's another city that's right next to it, the suburb, they call it the Accra de Silikum. So too, you could have something called Kedesh, and right next to it, they also call it Kedesh, even though it's and because it's next to the big city, they called it also by the name of that big city. So again, you have a big city, and you have a neighboring suburb, and you're going to call it, for instance, you're going to call New York City. This is New York City, and you're going to call the place next to New York City, you're going to call it New York. It's called New York. Outside the city, what is it called, Akiva? What? But outside the city, where it's in New York State, it's still called New York. This is New York, and that's New York. But
like different city, but same name. Like there'll be a city called
Bethlehem, what, Brooklyn?
and then there's another city called Brooklyn.
Right next, right. You're gonna
But
call
maybe old Brooklyn, new Brooklyn.
oh, right there, Brooklyn Heights, Brooklyn this. But I think the New York City there might be a good example. You're gonna call that maybe the you know what? I wonder if really the meat and the potatoes was New York City. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm saying in a certain sense, you could say, okay, but you're gonna call it, so why? But you're gonna call that also New York, okay? You're gonna call it the neighboring town, New York. Also, it's also New York. But you're calling it New York because the big city is New York. We're gonna call this also New York. Just some that type of idea. Gufa, the Gemara says. Aram halalu. These cities, ein osin osan lo tirin kitanim. You do not make these villages you don't make these cities very small. You have to make sure that they're maintained as a large city. Also, v'lo krachim gedolim. You got to make sure you have to be a population control. You have to make sure that these cities will never become, these Arim Miklat will never become major big cities. Ela ayoro beinano. You should set them up and make them, and they should only be maintained as a mid-sized city. Like we said, Rashi said, what was the issue? The issue was because everybody comes to the big city, and then the Goel Hadam, that relative who might want to avenge the blood moon, will come to the big city, and he will wait in ambush to kill the guy.
Rabbi, what happens if the cities, get a lot of people in them? So naturally it grows from the size of the population of the people coming to cities of refuge. Then what happens? Naturally, there's more people staying there.
Right, but there has to be population. The people, if it reaches a certain point that it's starting to become a no longer a mid-sized city, we would have to have people move to another city. We would have to have, let's say there's 48 cities, 42 cities of the Levium. We'll have to have the people move to other cities. We have to have some in Levium move to the other cities, because we can't allow, and we got to tell people, you want to move into the Levi city, you can't. If we reach a certain amount that there's a concern, this is coming and turning into a major city, we cannot allow, we would have to restrict people moving into that city. You can tell them to live next to the city, the suburb of the city, you want to go ahead and move in, but we can't allow the city of refuge to be a place where there'll be so many people coming, a major metropolis, because that's gonna endanger the lives of the people who killed unintentionally, because we're afraid that the guy.
Rabbi, if the closest city of refuge is, let's say, 2 miles away, but that city is completely occupied and you got to go 2 points up, 50 miles up, north, south, whatever. Okay. Now what happens?
It should never have been a situation. It's never a situation that the guy has to run, that this city would be, at least for sure in the 3 cities, the 3 big cities that were designated in Eretz Yisrael, or the 3, there's never a situation that a guy comes there and there's no space. There always will be space for him in that, in
To
those
find a
three cities.
refuge, but to live, he might be moved somewhere else.
I'm saying he will be able to live there. And if the problem is that there's too many people becoming, so then some of the Levium that live in that city, we will send the Levium out. We will tell the Levium that they gotta move to another city. But we were not,
But is
we're
it
not
the
gonna
Levium part of the remedy? The Levium is part of the tikkun that they should learn the proper way.
exactly. But there'll be, the rest of the people will be Levium, meaning the city is made up of Levium.
Got it.
So if we have to, if you have
Got it.
some Levium have to move, so some of them will move. Okay, have a great day.
Great.
We'll be back tomorrow, everybody.
Shkoyach.
Bezat Hashem.
Bye-bye.
Shkoyach to you. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Sure.
Bye. Akiva, welcome back.